Hello and welcome to In Touch with Durham County. I'm Deborah Craig-Ray, General Manager of Strategic Planning and Innovation. We're here virtually to bring you knowledge and information from Durham County government. If you follow our show, our guest today will be a familiar one. Dr. Mehul Mankad, Chief Medical Officer for Alliance Health, joins us again to address rising mental health challenges, especially as we try to manage life with the continuing COVID, trauma from recent gun violence, pressures from economic challenges, and more. He's here to help us understand the broad behavioral health challenges we're experiencing. And just as we did a year ago, we're devoting our whole show to this topic. Welcome back, Dr. Mankad. It's great to have you join us again.
Deborah, it is a pleasure.
Yes. Please tell our viewers a little bit about your background and expertise in psychiatry.
Absolutely. So I am a long-term resident of North Carolina, lived in Durham County for about 20 years before moving to a county next door a couple of years back, and did my psychiatry residency training at Duke, and have stayed on the faculty ever since then, so for about 16 or 17 years. Happy to be part of that community. Right now, I work as the Chief Medical Officer for Alliance Health, which administers mental health benefits to people who receive Medicaid as their insurance provider, or people who are uninsured.
Now, my next question is simple. How are you doing?
Oh, Deborah, thank you so much for asking. Sometimes, and I would love for us to get into this a little bit, I know that Durham City has this term that it's the I don't know if it's the slogan or the motto or what have you, that it's the city of medicine. We see it on the slides, and I know this is a county program, but, Durham City is within the county. And so we have a lot of healthcare providers who live and work in Durham County. And what I would love for us to include, and is not just, how the healthcare providers are doing, but everyone who works in a helping profession, how are they doing as they're trying to take care of us, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a nurse, whether they are in some other capacity where they are there for us, and what are we doing to be there for them? So, Deborah, I thank you so much for asking after me, and I will let you know that today I am doing just fine, partly because you asked me.
Well, very good. I mean, we certainly understand what a challenge this has been, particularly for those who are the closest to this pandemic. And we know you have your normal lives as well. And we just want to make sure everybody is in good shape.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So I will have to be honest, I'm hearing more conversations about the state of our mental health as a society. Our social interactions are still limited. We hear that mental health challenges are rising across the country. Are you seeing evidence of that in our own community?
We are seeing evidence in a variety of ways, and I'm happy to go into that. So on the one hand, the good news, like to lead with some good news, is that the youngest generation are very open. The so-called Gen Z folks are very open about talking about this. And they don't necessarily carry as much of the stigma or embarrassment or what have you that my generation and others are stuck with. And so that is good. On the flip side, as people talk about how they really are doing, the next step is for them to do something about it, whether that is to seek professional help or to take matters into their own hands and try to help themselves or help each other. And so, yes, There is more of a demand and more of a call for support in every age group, but particularly for young people. But now we have to kind of think about what now? What can we do for them now that they're speaking up?
So I've also heard it said that, crisis counseling is at an all-time high. Are we seeing stress and anxiety and depression?
You know what? Crisis is a great umbrella term to use when someone has had it and they don't know where to turn and things have reached a breaking point. And crisis is certainly reasonable to talk about. What we are seeing, unfortunately, is that people are coming in at the crisis stage and they're not necessarily coming in as things are building. And so they kind of they feel like they can handle it. It's one more thing and one more thing, and they get weighed down and they get weighed down. And then they reach their breaking point, and that's when they come in. And what I would love to see, and I imagine you would agree with me, Deborah, is for folks to come in and start talking and engaging in their best interests earlier and to have that
Yeah.
conversation sooner.
Well, that's a really good point. And I'm just kind of, again, looking at what's going on. This would, to me, seem to be a bit of better news. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is launching a new hotline number intended to address mental health issues and suicide prevention. It's that new 988 number, and it's expected to operate kind of in the same way that 911 functions. Can you talk about that a little bit and how it may help some people?
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you are up to speed on some of our national developments, but it turns out that a lot of these national things have to have local solutions. And so, yes, at a national level, anywhere you go in this country, within a month or two, if you dial 988, then you can get access to behavioral health crisis lines. Now, how that is implemented and what the experience will be is going to be up to local. And so we are happy at Alliance to partner with Durham County and with the other counties we serve to think through what will happen when someone in Durham calls 988.
And I know, of course, federal funding, the American Rescue Plan Act, and of course, even with our local budget that was recently approved, there are funds to help us enhance the availability of mental health services. And again, it's important that we all work together to make that happen so we can reach the people that need our help.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to touch on, even before the COVID crisis, there was what we call the opioid crisis.
Yes.
Are we still seeing increasing numbers of people struggling in this area?
The opioid crisis is a plague on our society, the likes of which we have never experienced, and it is absolutely a national emergency. It began a few years ago with loose prescription and diversion of pills of opiates. So, things like the oxycodones and the hydrocodones, brand names would be things like Percocet or Vicodin or what have you. And it has shifted. And what you may have heard, and there's a lot of different terms for this, the word that is on most people's minds is fentanyl, which is a synthetic opiate. And so you might hear it called either, fentanyl or a synthetic opioid or something along those lines. The incredible danger to the synthetic opiates like fentanyl is that they are 100 to 1,000 or even more times stronger than something like a morphine or even a heroin. And so just a few grains of sand, that degree can knock somebody out. And so you can imagine if an individual is taking one of these synthetic opiates and doesn't know what they're doing, then the distance between feeling an intoxicating effect and death is very short. And so in Durham County and in North Carolina, sadly, we have seen skyrocketing numbers of people dying from opioids in the past few years, and the culprit is really these synthetics. Now, there are solutions. Now, in the old days, there was a medicine available called methadone.
Oh, yes.
It is still available. It's been around for decades, and it can help people come off of these more dangerous opioids. There is a newer medicine available called Suboxone. And so having access to either of these, if somebody wants them, is important. And so that's called MAT. And then the last piece is a rescue kit. And the chemical that's inside it that can almost miraculously reverse the effects of intoxication. The chemical is called naloxone, and it is a true antidote to opioids. It can either be a nasal spray or an injection, and we want to make these freely available so that anyone can have them if they need them. And that's a big part of the plan to combat the opioid epidemic as well. Sometimes, and I like this name actually, sometimes the naloxone kits are called the Lazarus kit because they bring you back. And so you might hear them called that.
Yeah. Well, it really is encouraging that we do have some opportunities to serve more people, to help them, to save them, and that we're getting this funding in from these pharmaceutical companies. Yes, yes.
Yes.
So this seems like a good time to take a break. We're having a great conversation. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will continue our conversation. Stay with us.
Como pediatra, muchos padres tienen dudas sobre la seguridad de la vacuna contra COVID-19. La buena noticia es que sabemos que esta vacuna es muy eficaz y segura. Lo que sabemos es que el COVID y enfermarse con COVID es muy peligroso para los niños. Así que no duden en vacunarlos ahora mismo.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're having an important conversation about mental health in the time of this continuing pandemic. We've touched on a lot of great topics with Dr. Mankad. I'd like to pivot our conversation just a little bit. Just want to mention our young people. Of course, by now, most of them have returned to school in traditional fashion. They've gotten away from the virtual learning. So that means they're spending time with their friends and relearning social skills. How are our young students doing? What kind of trends are you seeing with them right now?
Deborah, what a great question. So I would say that there is not a one-size-fits-all answer for what our young people are experiencing. What we have seen at Alliance and elsewhere are a variety of outcomes. And so one is that a pretty good chunk of our very resilient group of Gen Z folks are just back into it and are happy to be there, engaging socially, re-engaging with school. I know, if you talk to education professionals, they will say that last year or the last 2 years, really, kids didn't keep up with some of their reading and writing and other subjects as well as they could have if they were in person. And so, there is some catch up that needs to happen, but that can absolutely happen. There's always time. And so that, I think that's the bulk of kids. Some kids are maybe taking things a bit too far. And so if it is time to come back, it's that social element that may be taking priority over all the other things that they should be doing, such as engaging in school. I know now that it's summer, they can certainly get back to the social piece, but we have seen some kids get kind of out of bounds and take things a little bit too far with coming back into the classroom in terms of being disruptive. But really, I think where you're headed, and I think where your question is what about those children who are struggling with reconnecting? Maybe in the past 2 years, maybe because a parent lost a job or something else happened, they had to change school districts, or maybe they had to move across the country and they're new to Durham County, or anything could have happened. And so when they come back, for you and me, it's coming back to jobs that we know and understand. But for them, it may be a very different environment. And so that adjustment and that connection may be a challenge, and that can lead to a whole host of behavioral problems. One of them could be what some folks call school phobia, so where the child just refuses to go to school, and then what do? You're the parent. It's 7:30 in the morning. You got to get to work, and the child has dug their feet in and said they're not going. The other group that I just want to mention, and I know that this is really not so much the school-age population, but geared more towards the parents of very young children. If you're a child right now under the age of 5, it's entirely possible that you actually have no memory of life before COVID. Can you imagine that, Deborah? That your parent says, we can take the mask off, we can go inside your friend's house, all of that stuff. And this child has never done that before in their life.
Yeah.
And so that is something that we're really on the lookout for, to see how those kids do, and if they need any sorts of re-education or support that maybe older kids, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, don't need.
Very good point. Yeah, I've actually heard of a situation where a young child was told they could take off their mask and they refused.
I have heard that too. Children that are very young, their worldview is much more narrow than ours.
That's right.
They are concerned about what is going on their street, what is going on with their best friend, what is going on with grandma. They just don't know as many people. They don't tune into the news like you and I do. And so I think the role of the parent is to, first of all, assure the child that the parent is on top of all these things, and that they will help guide the child safely through this journey.
Well, that's a good place to sort of transition. Just thinking about some of the traumatic events that are in the national news, the mass shootings at the Buffalo grocery store, and of the elementary school shooting in Desert Uvalde, Texas. I know the kids we try to protect our kids from those types of things, but sometimes we can't shelter them. So
That's right.
If we need to have those kinds of conversations, how should we approach that? Should we wait for them to ask about it? And I know it's probably a different conversation depending on the age of the child.
The age of the child and the temperament of the child. Every parent knows their child best. And you can certainly, or I can certainly try to give suggestions, but in the end, it's the parent that decides, how and when they want to have that conversation. My suggestion to enter this conversation is to begin with a question rather than to begin with kind of an authoritative stance. And so to ask the child, even relatively young children, what they know and what they think happened. And what you will hear, depending on the developmental age of the child, is going to be different. Some very mature children or older children may have details and have followed this on their own to a degree that you have not as a parent, and they may educate you. Like I said, with the Generation Z, as impressive as they are organizing, and they are our future. I know that sounds a little bit trite, but it really is true.
It is true.
And with very young children, it's going to be likely the opposite. They may have an explanation that they have created or that they have heard from their friends that does not match reality. And so I would begin with a question as to, what have they heard about violence in the community, whether it's racially motivated or a mass shooting or something else, and hear them out. The next step is to validate the emotional response that they are having. And so if they are experiencing anxiety or anger or frustration, or maybe they're experiencing the opposite, some kind of denial, or they're not feeling checked in, or that this is not relevant to them, to understand that their emotional life has value, and that if your reaction is different, that doesn't mean that their reaction is wrong. And so to validate what they're experiencing, and then to move into that place that parents are usually comfortable with, and that is the kind of the advice giving, and to tell them, like, look, this is how I see it, and let me explain to you what's going on. And so again, just to kind of recap: listen, validate, educate.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now let's focus on those of us who are now returning to work in an office. And there are some people who've been working from home for 2+ years, perhaps, and now they're being told by their employers, you need to come back into our building.
Yes.
So I can imagine that gives people some pause. There's some people that are fine with it, but then there are others, it can be a challenge.
About half of American workers would identify themselves as feeling burnt out. And I very much appreciate you bringing attention to this. The Surgeon General of the United States has decided this week and last week to really focus on this issue, Deborah. And in his opinion, there are 4 factors that contribute to employee burnout. And if you identify with any of these factors, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're burnt out, but it means that you do need to do a little bit of investigation in yourself and see how you can thrive in your work environment. So one of them is lack of control. Do you feel like people are making so many decisions about you without asking you? Another is time pressure. Again, in a tight labor market where there's a lot of, hiring signs and not enough people working, that puts a lot of pressure on the people that are coming in. Yeah. The third is chaos. And so as we shift from working from home and it took a few months to figure it out, and now you got your routine and you figured out how to get the Zoom to work right and all of that, if they're telling you to come back in the office and do some sort of hybrid and they haven't even figured out the details, there is going to be some chaos. And so that could be to levels that lead people to really struggle. And then the last one is alignment. And what that means is the mission of the organization where you work and your supervisor's mission aligned with what you think you should be doing. And if those things are kind of out of whack, that can lead to people struggling as well. And I agree with you right now, compared to any other time that I'm aware of, more people are struggling with at least one of those 4 things than they ever have.
Yeah. So, as people feel like they maybe can't move forward, are there some resources they should seek?
Yes, yes. I would think about it in a few different ways. And so one way is that you mentioned crisis earlier, so I'm going to come back to that. A lot of folks will just let stuff pile up and pile up on them. And, right now we're talking about working people. And so, more and more demands at work until they feel like they crack. And my suggestion is, in that moment, if you feel like you've kind of reached your breaking point, rather than say something in the workplace that you're going to regret later, to excuse yourself and recollect, take those 10 deep breaths, and then try to come up with an answer or a solution that you can be proud of. One of my colleagues in mental health said, no one has ever gotten in trouble for asking to go to the bathroom. And so if you just need to pull yourself out of a toxic situation, just say, I need to go to the bathroom, and then come back. And so that's something you can do in the moment if you are feeling overwhelmed right now. The other thing that I'd recommend is that before people engage with work, you mentioned, that we're now kind of in this zone where some are working from home and some are working in the office and some people are doing a hybrid. To really think about work as work, for those who are working hybrid or at home, I'm speaking really for myself, it's hard to have boundaries. If you are working in the space where you live, when does your workday begin and end? And if you're going to start your workday, to really get ready for that and to think about it as your workday, and to get in that mental space where you're doing that work. And then, more importantly, when that workday is done, to leave work at work, even if that means you're just moving 2 feet over from your desk in your bedroom over to the TV or something like that. And then the last thing I'll mention, and you were talking about resources, if you are doing all these other things that I mentioned and it's just not enough, there is no shame in reaching out for help. Reaching out for help is different for everybody. That could mean, starting with a friend and telling them, look, this is what I'm going through. What's it like for you? It could mean telling your supervisor that, look, I'm working hybrid. You may not know how much work I'm doing because we're not in the same place. And so let me just share that the load is no longer possible. Or it could mean reaching out for professional help. Some medium-sized and larger companies have something called employee assistance, which is free counseling for a certain number of sessions. You may or may not have that benefit from your employer, but if you do, it is free and confidential. And if that is not enough, you can certainly access more professional care.
Well, this has been, again, a wonderful conversation to help our community as we just deal with life. And so just want to thank you so much for what you do in Durham to help our folks. And is there a final thought you'd like to add as we conclude?
Deborah, I just want to thank you and Durham County for highlighting both the life and the mental well-being of the people who have chosen to make Durham County their home. It's a wonderful place to live, and a lot of that credit goes to you and your team.
Well, thank you so much. And we'd like to thank all of you for joining us. On behalf of all of us at Durham County Government, enjoy your summer, and we appreciate you viewing us. Cheers.